Hello, my name is Gabby Richardson, and you are listening to The Nexus of Narratives, where we use stories to bring people together across belief systems. New episodes are released every Monday on your favorite podcast platform, where I have a conversation with a guest about an obstacle that they faced in their life that invited them to take a look at their own beliefs, whether about themselves or about the world around them. We talk about how those beliefs were formed and how formative moments shape how we interact with the world. The Nexus of Narratives is what we will uncover through this story exploration. It's the common thread that unites all of us, no matter what our beliefs are. And if you're an avid podcast listener, you know the deal. Please take a moment on the platform where you are listening to follow, rate, and review. Those little acts go a long way in ensuring that this important work reaches more people. Take a look at the show notes for information on this episode, how to connect with today's guest, and any content warnings. So if there's anything that you want to be aware of, that's the place to find it. So without any further delay, I look forward to sharing this story with you, and I'll see you again here on your feed next Monday or sooner on Patreon. Hello and welcome to the Nexus of Narratives. Tatiana, thank you so much for joining and being willing to open up and share a story with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be wonderful. So we met virtually. I'm so grateful you're one of the now many who has felt some sort of connection from my high level overview of this podcast. And it's so meaningful to connect with people like you who just get this bird's eye view and feel connected to the purpose of this platform. So thank you for being one of those. And if you were to just briefly introduce yourself and your social location, what would you share and like people to know?
Yeah, so I am a first generation Latina. I am a daughter of immigrants. My dad is Colombian, my mom's Guatemalan. I am a wife, a pet owner. I have a dog named Turkey and a cat named Saturn. And yeah, I am just on this mission to just spread more awareness on healing and give people some hope that, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel.
Beautiful. So beautiful. And something else of connection. So my husband's mom, my mother-in-law, is from Guatemala. So
cool.
Yeah. And then he and I are both from immigrant families too. So nice. Fun connection. Well, my father's an immigrant. My mother was born and raised in the United States, but raised by immigrants too. So I absolutely love that connection. So thank you for reminding me of that common thread that we have. Yeah. And so like I like to joke with all of the effects and lights, camera, action. What story did you come to share and what would you like to talk about here today on Nexus of Narratives?
Yeah, so I am a complex trauma survivor. I have lived in survival mode really the majority of my life. I think that now I am on the other side of healing, but I've had, a lot of experiences that created trauma in my body and my nervous system. And it all stems back to maybe as early as age 5 or 6 years old. And I'm sure maybe even before that, I just don't have conscious memory of that. And I also have generational trauma. And I think that I really struggled growing up with chronic anxiety that wasn't really addressed. And because it wasn't really addressed, it actually started to manifest into worsened symptoms. And so I I struggled a bit growing up as a kid, making social connections. I had a lot of social anxiety to the point where I would quite literally become mute. So, when we hear about like selective mutism, for example, I was definitely one of those children where someone would say hi to me or talk to me and I would become mute. And, as a child, I didn't know what was going on, and my parents just thought I was quote unquote shy, and so I was sort of labeled as the quiet one, the shy one. But as I grew up, it actually got worse, and it started to manifest into some psychosomatic symptoms. I was taken to doctor after doctor after doctor, trying to figure out what was going on with my body. I had really chronic stomach pains and physical pains, and I was always sick, right? And because no doctor could really figure out what was going on with me, my parents actually started to think that I was making it up. And again, it wasn't addressed. And so they thought that I was trying to get out of school or get out of eating or, things that children sometimes want to quote unquote get out of, right? But there's always a reason why, they're trying to avoid something. And so I was one of those kids, and stop me at any point. But, as I got older into my teenage years, I started to kind of access a little bit more of my voice, but that anxiety actually turned into anger. And so I was very reactive and maybe rebellious at times. And at the same time, I ended up in a very toxic and abusive relationship during my teenage years. And this relationship was very abusive, both physically and emotionally. And that really was a difficult time for me because I had a very chaotic household, and then I had a very chaotic internal world. And I didn't really have a lot of people that I could share these experiences with. And so I didn't really have a lot of support. And so even in this toxic relationship, it was almost like this person wasn't healthy for me. And at the same time, it was almost the only person that I could rely on at the time. And so, of course, when you're in these kinds of relationships, there is some shame that comes up because there was this part of me that knew that I shouldn't be in this kind of relationship, right? There was always this inner knowing that I had, but for some reason, it was really difficult to break. In hindsight, I understand that my nervous system just didn't have the capacity for it. There were a lot of things playing out externally and internally that just prevented me from leaving this relationship. But things started to escalate, right? I was in this relationship for, I want to say about 4.5 years. And so it was a really long time. And I went through this really depressive state where I did want to take my own life, and I lost all hope, and it felt like that was the only way out at the time. I had asked to go to therapy and to see a therapist, which wasn't received very well. So I never actually received that support growing up. And then I think that, I am definitely a woo-woo kind of person, and I like to say like the universe, works in these mysterious ways, and I think the universe is always sending you signs, and I do feel like it is my life's purpose to help others heal, and especially people who have experienced things that I've experienced. And so I was able to make it out, and making it out really meant getting an education and getting into college, that got me out of my chaotic household. It got me out and away from this chaotic romantic relationship that I was in. And so that's sort of how I started to find myself. And I was really bad at school, by the way, side note. And the only reason I got into college was because I was part of this program for minorities who didn't really have great grades, didn't really have the income. And so the college that I went to offered this program for minorities, and I was able to go into part of being in this program meant that you had to do a summer program, take summer classes, live on campus before you actually started college in the fall with everyone else. And so that's what I did. And that's sort of what got me away from this relationship. And so during that time is sort of when I started to make new connections and feel like, oh, wow, I can rediscover myself and become whoever I want. And I think that was sort of my goal as I started this new life in college, where I wanted to start over. This was my fresh start, and I had created enough safe relationships that it felt okay to finally end this abusive relationship that I was in, which, of course, then liberated me. And all this was happening. I was still, even after I ended this relationship, I was still in survival mode. I wasn't in therapy. I wasn't doing any healing. So this was sort of just what was happening internally. But I was still struggling with other things. As I started to rediscover myself in college, as I started to meet new people, I was also partying a lot, and I was drinking a lot, and I was not taking school very seriously. And I was still struggling in other ways. So even though I was out of the home, out of this relationship, things in I was still struggling, right, with my mental health, with my behavioral patterns, and I like to share this story. I like to share that I struggled significantly in school because here I am a therapist. I didn't say that earlier when I was introducing myself, but I am a therapist. I am a somatic experiencing practitioner, and I failed psychology 3 times. And I like to share that because I think that sometimes when we fail at something, we might think to ourselves, oh, this might just not be the path for me. This is something that I'm not meant to do this. I'm supposed to do something different. So I kept going. I was like, no, this is what I want to do. I want to help other people. I know that I want to help other people. And I just kept going. I finally passed psychology. And mind you, this was psychology 101. This was introductory to psychology. And I kept going. But the more that I started to take school seriously, the more that I learned to absolutely love learning about myself and understanding my brain and my body. And I ended up double majoring in human development and family studies with psychology. And so I fell in love with the field, and that's sort of when I decided that I wanted to transition into graduate school and become a therapist, and that's sort of what led me here.
That's amazing. So to go back, there were several things that you shared that really stood out to me, and the first of which was how I noticed you draw a parallel between growing up feeling like you were in survival mode, and like I almost got a flavor of, I know I'm not supposed to be in this. I know that there's something else for me that I really should be in, and it's not this. But then also a similar experience, what sounds like after you did leave that home situation, but then now you were in a new relationship, but similar flavor of, this isn't the thing for me. maybe I don't know what is, maybe I do know what is, but this isn't the thing. So I'm curious about the common threads between those two. Do you feel like there were similarities between those different experiences for yourself?
Between the experience of home and the relationship, or with college?
Yeah, well, like with home and the relationship, because that's where I heard you say a couple of similar things there.
Yeah. I mean, for sure, right? I think that being in this abusive relationship was very familiar to me. And I grew up in a home that was very inconsistent. Lots of love, no love. Lots of love, no love. And there was almost like no in between, right? And so I think that was very familiar in this relationship, where it was like abuse, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I love you. Abuse, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I love you, right? And it's very, very familiar. And, you know, that's what I was used to. And at the same time, I did learn growing up that, you know, you're not supposed to be in these kinds of relationships. And so it was very mixed messaging all around, right? And as you can imagine, that's very confusing for a child, right? And a teenager. And so it was this inner knowing of like, I know that something isn't right. I know that I'm not supposed to be in this. And yet it feels so familiar. And at the time, I didn't see how it connected to how I was raised. At the time, I didn't see that, but I did learn that in my psychology classes in college, right? And I could see it just made so much sense to me as I started to understand the brain and the body a little bit more. But definitely there were a lot of similarities between what was going on at home and what was going on in my relationship.
And kind of what were some of the beliefs that maybe you had developed, maybe about yourself or about systems, others, people, that you think influenced maybe what felt like a repeat pattern, just a different abuser?
That's such a good question. You know, there was always this internal conflict, right? Because I think that, again, going back to my inner knowing, also, if we have any astrology listeners here, anyone who is also woo-woo, I'm a Virgo moon. And so I'm very analytical, very self-reflective, I've always been that way. And so I've always kind of thought about things and reflected about who I am and wanting to improve all the time. And at the same time, my external life didn't reflect what I maybe was believing. So I think there was this unconscious belief that I wasn't worthy. But at the same time, there was this inner knowing of like, I am worthy. I'm also a Leo sun. And so there's a lot of conflicting, I would say, conflicting signs, conflicting beliefs, and conflicting feelings all around, right? Like, I think that there was this part of me that wanted to shine and be confident. And I kind of did express that. In my early college years, I was definitely an entertainer. I would use my humor as my coping skill, and I would want to make everyone laugh. I was also actually, growing up, a dancer for 15 plus years. And so I was a performer. And so I think that there was, again, these external and internal conflicts of like, I want to shine. I want to be this confident person, this mask of like, let me entertain you and let me make you laugh. And then this internal battle of like, am I worthy? Am I worthy enough? I know that I'm not supposed to be doing XYZ. I know I'm not supposed to be in this relationship. I know I need to leave, right? And so there were a lot of things happening for me. And so part of me felt like I was confident. Part of me felt like I did deserve more. And then the other part of me felt like I wasn't worthy of love, right? And this is sort of what I get, right? This is it for me.
Oh, the things that you're saying is just, I think it's hitting in this place of relation for me and it feels deeply relatable. And I don't know if it's just because I feel a lot of relation to what you share, especially that conflict. And I think for me, what speaks to me is like, whether like for better or worse or whatever the judgment might be on it, is I showed up like that. And it came from a place of insecurity. And when I was in a relationship that for many years, I was like, there was a really big part of me that was like, what have I done? Why am I in this? What am I doing? Mm-hmm. Why have I not left yet? Mm-hmm. And then there's the other side of me that was like, Gabby, you made your bed. Now sleep in it. This is the life that you set up for yourself. So this is what you live with, as opposed to, and so I would flip flop between those. And it would also come out in arguments. Even so, after I left my marriage, so I married the person I dated in high school. We were together for the better part of like 7 or 8 years. And then we were only married for about a year before I first realized, I was like, oh, I need to leave. Mm-hmm. And so after I left him and I started dating DJ, who is now my husband and father, we have a child, father of my child. And as we were early in our relationship was, oh, I love you so much. It was so passionate, like so excellent in so many ways. But then it was just like one thing would go wrong. And then I'd be like, I don't need this. I left once before, I can leave again. And so I found myself still doing this like kind of funky flip-flop thing. Mm-hmm. And I know what it meant for me when I finally like stepped into my power and made the decision to work on myself to be the best version of myself, which is an ongoing adventure. Every single minute of every single day is committed to that. And so I see this like lightness and brightness in you. And so for you, like what has that experience been, facing those beliefs, experiencing the flip-flops, and then saying, oh, actually, I'm going to choose different?
Don't go anywhere just yet. We will be back with this conversation in just a moment. Thank you so much for spending your time with me here on The Nexus of Narratives. As you may know by now, it goes a long way to support the podcast by listening, following, rating, and reviewing. So if you have enjoyed the content, please take a moment to support extending the reach of this important work. While the public episodes of The Nexus of Narratives focus on the stories of our guests, how belief systems have been formed, and how to build connection, we keep the conversation going on Patreon. We've built a phenomenal community of peer connectors on Patreon who are looking to build a more compassionate world together. While I could be continuing the conversation with the guest or digesting fantastic themes with my dear friend Rowan, there is a lot of great bonus content on Patreon, including additional benefits for different tiers. Search Nexus of Narratives on Patreon or click the link in the show notes to join this exclusive community. I look forward to connecting with you there. For more information on the Nexus of Narratives, ways to listen, opportunities to connect with me, or share a story of your own, go to nexusofnarratives.org. I personally monitor that inbox, so it is a quick and simple way to connect directly with me. Whether you're a new listener or have been around for a while, I'm deeply grateful for your time and commitment to this work. Without keeping you any longer, let's get back to the story.
Oh my gosh, that's such a great question. And I think for me, I really struggled to be in healthy relationships because that felt so unsafe for me. And I rejected anyone who was almost too nice to me. That felt scarier than someone being mean to me. I was so used to being talked to a certain way, and I was so used to very direct or being talked to firmly, that's sort of what I liked, even because it was familiar, going back to the familiarity, right? And I know with my husband now, he is such a healthy human being, and he has, a secure attachment, and he knows how to be in healthy relationships. And that was a struggle for me. That was something that, I needed this constant stimulation almost of like, I needed conflict and I needed drama. And that's what my brain was wired for. I needed constant stimulation, right? And that stimulation came from maybe like arguing or, of course, and, as I continued my life living in this state of survival, I was very reactive and I had a lot of unresolved wounds. And so I wanted to be loved and nurtured and treated with gentleness internally, and externally, I couldn't accept that. I didn't know how to accept it. And so again, it's this push and pull, right? Of like, I want it, I don't want it, I want it, I don't want it. And that was hard to navigate. I think that I also met my husband really young, and we've been together for 14 years now. I am 32 and he's 34. And so I think that, we pretty much grew up together as well, right? Like, I think that we met I like to say that we met when we were babies, right? And so I think I've really learned to be in relationship because of him. His stability and his secure attachment and his way of just showing up in the relationship helped me learn how to be in relationship. But that happened over time. It was definitely a learning curve for me, and it took a lot of therapy, and it took a lot of knowing that I am safe now. And to this day, he reminds me, you're safe now. You're safe. It's normal to get into those states. And I can often go back into memories or experiences, and he reminds me, you're safe. And in the past, I couldn't accept even that. I couldn't accept that I was safe, that my mind and my body were not on the same page, right? Yes, logically, I knew I wasn't in those situations anymore. Logically, I knew I'm worthy of love. Logically, I know that he's not going anywhere, but my body wasn't on that same page, right? I didn't feel that way. And so it was definitely a lot of reassurance, a lot of therapy, a lot of unlearning, to really remember that, yes, I am worthy of love. I am safe, and nobody's going anywhere. He's not going to emotionally or physically abandon me, right? And that is, I think also, I think that I've always known that there is more for me. I've always known that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, even when I wasn't there yet. And it was really just holding on to that hope of like, yeah, I know that this sucks, but nothing sucks more than what I used to be, than what I have experienced. And I think that whatever I have been through after my childhood years and my abusive relationship, honestly, I don't think anything could be worse than that. And I think that's what kept me going. And that's what's always, because I've struggled a lot in relationships and struggled to feel seen and heard. And it's been a ride, it's been a journey. And so I think that it really has just been holding on to hope of like, no, I know that there's something more out there for me. And nothing can be worse than what I've experienced. So I think that's maybe where my little light comes from, knowing that there is something to look forward to.
Like it gives me the flavor of just like resilience.
Yeah.
Of saying like, I've been through it.
Yeah.
So I know that I can withstand whatever life brings my way because I know what it's like to suffer and get out of it and be happy.
Yeah, exactly.
So I know that I can do it again.
1,000.
And so there's like a beautiful toughness to that, but also at the same time, a tenderness that I experience from you. And when you were just sharing that, what was coming to my mind is the tremendous power of the belief systems that we develop as people at a young age. There's a lot of research that suggests before the age of 18, we've already developed 95+% of our beliefs about ourselves and the world around us based on how we're socialized. And to have that experience of your life be one that is rooted in abuse and trauma and insecurity, it sounds like a lack of stability and grounding to be a person who then lives a life of like flip-flopping and oh, I think I deserve this. And I think this is what I need in my life, but this is what is coming out of it. To me, speaks to the power of beliefs that were so deeply set into your mind and your body that were different from the path that you intellectually, to a certain degree, knew was there for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 1,000%. 1,000%.
And I feel like this misalignment of just like, I want to go here, but then that's happening. And then this is happening and I'm going over here, but I want to go over there, but my body's going over here.
1,000%. That's exactly how I felt, like all directions. Yeah. And I think that, part of that resiliency really stemmed from having other supports, right? And so I didn't have the support of like friends, or but I had outlets. So I was a dancer for, 15 plus years. And so I think that really helped. That was sort of my outlet of when I'm on stage, I get to be whoever I want, right? Like nobody knows what I'm experiencing internally or externally. It's just me on stage, and I get to be present and perform and just do my thing, right? And I think that was really something that supported me in creating that resiliency. And then after, I was able to develop some relationships that were helpful to continue that resiliency. But I think also humor, just again, that entertainer part of me of wanting to make people laugh. And I think also thinking about it, it was my way of gaining approval as well, right? Like if I can make people laugh, people like me. And I know that, if they like me, they can stick around. And so it was my way of gaining that approval because I didn't feel that worthiness, but it worked. It worked, and it served its purpose, right? At the time, it served its purpose. And of course, I realize I can't use humor for everything, and I don't avoid using humor, but it was such a great coping skill at the time that really, I think, helped me get through really tough times. If I can just laugh, and if I can make other people laugh, then I'll be okay.
It's such a powerful Band-Aid.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like that Band-Aid that you shower with for a couple of days and you like forget it's there and you're like, whoa, that Band-Aid is still on there. That's wild.
Yeah.
Is it going to hurt more to take that Band-Aid off? Yeah, probably.
Yep.
Yeah. I resonate with that. I share the mask of humor, I like to call it, or as like one of my friends and I very theatrically will, mask of humor. I too am a dancer. And I love going on stage for a similar reason. And I also joke, I'm like, dance is one of the reasons why I'm a good person. It's one of my few outlets. And if I haven't danced for a few weeks, who knows what kind of version of Gabby you're going to be getting. So I definitely deeply relate to that. And I hear this sense of like what you said that was so extremely powerful to me that I want to repeat was this realization that you made of like, if I'm funny, if I'm likable, then people will stick around. And what I want is people to stay around. And like the double-edged sword for me of that in my life, and I'm curious if it was like this for you too, is like the more that I focused on just being likable rather than accepting myself as whole and being authentic, is that people only liked a version of me. People didn't accept me for who I am, good, bad, ugly, up, down, left, right, no matter the mood, is people only wanted a very specific Gabby. And when that very specific Gabby was tired, no, we don't care about her. We don't care about whoever this is. We actually only like this mask that you created. And it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy of creating exactly what I was afraid of and exactly what I thought I was avoiding.
1000%. Yes, that was exactly my experience. I felt like that was the only version of me that could be seen. That's the only way that I could show up in the world, because that's how people saw me and that's what they expected of me. And they didn't know what to do when I was feeling anything other than happy, right? If I was feeling sad or irritable or, it just wasn't received. And so I learned that I couldn't show those parts of myself. And it was a struggle because during that time, I also dissociated a lot. And so I would dissociate when I was in conversation with people, and I would dissociate while I was driving, and it was noticeable, and I would make jokes about it. I would laugh. People started to just label me as spacey. Oh, you have ADHD. I don't have ADHD, by the way. I was always dissociating, and I felt this deep shame, this deep level of shame, because I didn't know how much time had gone by. I didn't know what happened. I completely blanked out, did not know what was going on in those moments where I dissociated. When I came back, it was really embarrassing to me. I didn't know how people were perceiving me. And of course, gotta keep that mask on, right? And so, I would just laugh it off and make jokes, but it was really difficult for me to show up authentically. And it wasn't just, I had a lot of different masks. I didn't have just like the entertainer mask. There were other places where I was I had the quiet mask. I was shy and gentle, or I had my people pleasing, where it was like, oh yes, like I'll just do anything. I'm the good girl, right? And then I had my outgoing self, and then I had my angry self, right? But those different masks could only come out in those situations or in those environments where that's how people perceived me. And so I didn't know how to just show up fully as myself all the time, right? Wherever I was, I felt like I needed to remember which mask I was using with those people, if that makes sense.
Ooh, yeah. Like the need to be loved and accepted and not abandoned, and keep people around like that defense mechanism by, I will be whoever and whatever it takes for you to stay around. Please, please. Wait, who was I with this person? Who was I with that person? Like, that's what I'm hearing.
Yes, exactly that. Exactly that. And it really put me into this box, right? And I couldn't get out of that box until I started my healing journey, this deeper level of healing where I was able to access all of these parts of me, and I could just show up. Like, it's okay to have your professional hat and your silly hat and your, I don't know, whatever hat you want, right? And you don't have to be one way all of the time. I think there was also this narrative that I had where I felt like people were going to think that I was fake. If I was one way with one person and then I was another way with another person, people were going to think that I was fake. And I didn't want to be labeled as that, even though I was feeling very inauthentic, right? And so I was carrying all of these different beliefs, narratives, feeling masks, and it was a lot to juggle. It was a lot.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So how does it feel now, like stepping into this place? You mentioned, okay, I'm going to step into my authenticity. I am all of these things together. That is me. I do wear different hats, but it's still me. Yeah. Those things are interchangeable.
Yeah.
And so how has that experience been for you now, as opposed to presenting in different ways for different people?
Yeah, it sometimes does sneak up a little bit, right? Because again, we're never 100% healed and we're not robots. Nobody's perfect. But I think now I can notice when it's sneaking up, and I can just be okay with, yeah, it's okay for me to show up however I want. I think there was this other narrative that I held on to that I needed to, for example, this podcast, right? I would consider this like a professional thing, right? And so I had to have like my professional hat on. And I became a therapist at a really young age. I was only 23. So I felt like I had to be this professional and had this big career at the age of 23. And then outside of work, I was partying and drinking excessively because I was still not going into my own therapy and doing my own healing. And so I lived these two different worlds where it was like I had to pretend to be this professional, and I didn't know how to show up as a professional as a 23-year-old. And then I was out and being quote unquote my true self, where I was partying outside of work, right? And I didn't know how to hold that. But now I get to say, yes, this might be a quote unquote, let's say this is like a professional setting, right? But I don't have to be so uptight and I don't have to show up a certain way, right? It's like I can just feel into my body and just show up with whatever is coming up, whatever emotion is coming up. So there are days, and I think that going back to the astrology, I'm sorry if non-astrology people are like, all right, stop it with the astrology. I'm also a Cancer rising. So I'm a very emotional and watery human, right? And so I feel things very deeply. And I think that I really lean into the mood that I'm in, the energy that I'm in for that day. So some days I am going to be a little bit more serious, right? Some days I am going to be a little bit more bubbly, and I feel like I can just lean into whatever my body is experiencing and be okay with just going with that.
Mm-hmm. And how does that feel in your body to kind of flow with like that?
Exactly that. It feels flowy. It feels flowy. It feels like I don't have to be so rigid, right? And I remember feeling like this tightness in the past, right? This tightness of like, I can't move, I can't look, I can't turn my head. I felt stuck, right? Because I had to hold on to, whatever however it was that I was presenting myself at the time. And now I can just be, right? I can just allow things to flow.
Mm-hmm. I can see it even like for anyone who's listening and not watching video, but to see even as you were explaining that, to go from this like very tense, like you embodied it very beautifully of what I picture that experience to be like, of being like, rigid, uptight. And then actually what the experience is like now is just this relaxation, this flow with, and like a more gentle movement inside and outside. And I can only imagine how people experience you in that light and in that flow and in that authenticity of yourself must be extremely powerful to experience, to be around you, compared to which mask must I wear now? Which mask must I wear now over here? Right? Like that sounds so stinking stressful.
Yes, it was. It was. Yeah, my anxiety got so bad in grad school and when I was working in community mental health, where it almost reminded me of when I was a child and I would become selectively mute. And same thing would happen at work where someone would just look at me or say hi to me and I would go into a panic. Can you imagine that? Someone would just say, "Hey, Tatiana," panic mode. And I was internally, it felt like I was quite literally dying. My throat would close up. Everything would become tight. It was very, very stressful. But what I like to say, and this is, the light at the end of the tunnel all the time, right? It's like, here I am, and I am someone who had this chronic social anxiety where would go into a panic anytime someone would talk to me. And here I am talking to you, right? And that is the beauty of healing. That is the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. And with someone who is practically a stranger, to be able to have such an incredible open conversation with, like, that's the other side of it. And that's so extremely powerful. And I mean, thank you for trusting me with those pieces of yourself too. And I think this is a perfect time to transition to the questions that I invite everyone to answer. Is the first, how can your story create connection for people who have similar experiences or can relate to anything that you shared?
Yeah, I think that sharing my experience, I think really helps other women feel like they're not alone. Because I know that I felt very alone in my journey, and I felt like this was me. This is who I am. And I internalized that anxiety, and I felt like I can't ever change, right? And it felt like, why is everyone else normal, quote unquote normal, and I can't be normal? Why can't I just have a regular conversation like somebody else? And it feels very lonely when you're experiencing these things. And I hope that my story, my experience really helps other people, other women feel like they are not alone. That, and I think that even if we don't ever personally meet, there is connection there, right? I think hearing people's stories is connection. We're connecting on some level, right? And so that's my thought.
Absolutely. I think that was so beautifully said. Like the perfect cherry on top, sharing those stories, being open is connection.
Yeah.
Second question for you is, what do or did you need to feel most connected to the people around you?
Yeah, I think that I really needed to be seen. I needed to be heard and validated. I think those are the three things: seen, heard, and validated. I didn't need anyone to do anything. I just needed to know that I wasn't losing it, right? That I wasn't, again, going back to what I was saying, alone in this journey.
Yeah. That's so powerful. I feel that very strongly. And for someone who might feel like they're in a relatable place to where you were, what might you say to a past version of yourself?
I think what I've been saying throughout this episode, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I guarantee you that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and healing is possible. Healing your nervous system is possible.
Absolutely. Beautiful. And last but not least, if anyone is still listening, and by golly, they're like, these two have completely lost it. I cannot relate to a single thing that they said. This is bonkers. How can your story create connection for people who have different beliefs and different experiences?
Yeah. Even if you have different experiences or different beliefs, I think that A, we're all human, and B, we all have a nervous system. And so even though we all go through different things, we all have a nervous system, and we all need to support our nervous system, and no nervous system is perfect, right? No human is perfect. And so I think that allowing yourself to lean into what your nervous system, your body is saying to you, right?
Beautiful. Lovely. No matter how different the beliefs are, you still got a nervous system, unless you're a robot.
Unless you're a robot.
So. Well, wonderful. And if anyone wants to get in touch with you or see any of your resources, how can people connect with you?
Yeah, so I actually just deleted my Instagram, so goodbye Instagram. So that's usually where people would be able to connect with me, but I invite you to come hang out with me on my podcast. Come listen to my podcast. It's actually called She is Resilient. So I would love for you to come hang out with me there.
Beautiful. Perfect. And we'll include links in the show notes as well so that people can easily find that. And thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your vulnerability and openness and flexibility as whatever happened tech-wise towards the beginning-ish there, just as things were really getting good. And I'm really grateful for what you shared here. It's deeply meaningful to me, and I'm sure it will really touch others as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me and for having this platform.
Wow, what a tremendous conversation that was. So thank you for taking the time to listen, and I hope you were able to find just as many nuggets of wisdom as well as actionable steps to build connections in the spaces all around you. This is an extremely grassroots production, so thank you to my dear friend Rowan for their commitment to this work by posting on social media and leading fantastic conversations with me on Patreon. So be sure to join that community on Patreon and enjoy the additional content. And thank you, of course, to my sweet and talented husband, DJ, for creating the music that is used in this podcast. Now, let's go out and create some connection in this world.